Hi everyone, and welcome back to Project No Buy. In today's video, we're going to be addressing another viewer comment that was from a long time ago. And in doing so, we're going to kind of continue this conversation of changing our attitudes towards our stuff. So the comment goes as follows, and you can tell how long ago it was made by what it says here. So I did buy 2 Christmas gifts this Black Friday, which I feel fine about, but I almost bought, honestly still tempted, another pair of shoes that I already have and love. They're white leather with rhinestones and star patterns on the side. Love these shoes, but since they're white, they get dirty and don't look their best faster than other shoes. So there's all kinds of, other justifications here. We've all been there. I've certainly been there. So no judgment on this commenter. The commenter then goes on to say that I had just been planning to get the shoes professionally cleaned as my efforts to clean them myself were coming up a little short. I was really tempted to repurchase, but decided to just take them to a local shoe repair to have them cleaned. The cleaning cost was $35. I decided it was still worth it, but honestly, barely, and a little under half the cost to replace. Is it really worth it to clean versus buying new? They wonder if I've talked about it on any of my videos. Here we go. We're talking about it now. How to decide when or why something is worth maintaining over buying new. So let's just say, for experiment's sake, that you always believe it is best to maintain. And, the questions that come up there are, what costs would that incur and to what end? And I think the fact that it's often more expensive to maintain what we have than to buy a new one is one of the huge symptoms of our problem towards overconsumption, our problem of overconsumption in our society today. The attitudes are being directly manipulated that it's better to buy the new one than to maintain our old ones, because that's how it is. That's the reality. When it's not that much more expensive, or in some cases, some ridiculous cases, actually cheaper to buy the new one. And we've run up against this situation a couple of times. I think it's a big issue with things like technology, where something like replacing a cracked screen can be multiple hundreds of dollars, and a new phone might just be a few hundred more dollars. And it makes it really easy to justify the newer thing, even if you don't technically need it at the time. And the repair of the old one could do the trick, even if it feels like a bad investment, because those hundreds of dollars could go towards a newer one that maybe would last longer. It might have more features. It might have other kind of benefits that come with the newness of it. So at the end of the day, I guess to answer your question quickly, is that it really comes down to values. And if we can afford to, again, it's a slippery slope talking about finances in some regards, because I guess in this particular example, in a lot of examples, we're still spending more to get the new ones. And so I guess if the choice is less expensive to repair and maintain, then it becomes more of a case of let's live in line with our values and spend slightly less money to just maintain the ones we have, because we want to keep the ones we have for as long as possible. And again, we can pull on the other aspects of consuming that we want to participate in rather than not participate in, right? If we buy the new ones, then the old ones become waste faster than they need to. They end up cluttering up a landfill somewhere, or, I'm assuming shoes are too difficult to be fully recycled in most cases. And so, we want to lean into that value. It's just about kind of assigning, I guess, choices, assigning values to our choices that help us maybe make these decisions. And technically, we're not saving money by buying the new ones at this point. And, we could try to do all kinds of complex calculations about the lifespan of them. And so therefore, if I buy the new ones, will they last this much longer than the old ones being repaired or whatever? And it gets complicated, but I like to try to keep it as simple as possible, and not go too far into those calculations. And you never know, you might buy the new shoes and then somebody might run over them with their bike or something, and then there's a massive scuff mark in them, and then they can't get worn out. There are circumstances that might make the new shoes wear out faster than the old ones, or than they normally would, in other words. So the calculations even can be imperfect. And so my point here is that it's probably always, I can't really commit even in a hypothetical scenario here, it's probably always the right decision, or better decision, in terms of trying to be the most conscious consumer, to repair instead of replace. And again, falling back on April's topic of going without is another option. Maybe not in the case of shoes or, everyday footwear, but in our lives, we recently had our dish soap dispenser kind of have a piece break off. And it's not an essential piece to its operation. It just changes a little bit of how the soap comes out. And we got this metal soap dispenser. We thought the metal one would last longer than the plastic alternatives. And alas, the metal little piece on top, or maybe it was a plastic component, but the little screw on the end of the spout just broke. And of course, we can't just replace that one tiny part of this dish soap dispenser. And, maybe that's beyond the realms of reason for parts replaceability. And there are many other examples where parts should be much more replaceable. This is maybe not one of those, so I'm not trying to argue that every little dish soap dispenser should have replaceable parts. Wouldn't that be great, though? Wouldn't that be a wonderful society in which there was replaceable parts for most dish soap dispensers? I suppose I could be accused of arguing for something like communism, though, where there's only 2 or 3 dish soap dispenser options and you just got to choose between 1 or 2, and then you don't get to express your identity in your home. And that's how we're able to have replaceable parts for things. So I don't know. I mean, I'll let you draw your own conclusions on that one. The right to multiple aesthetic dish soap dispensing options. We've got to retain that as human beings. Okay, anyway, our dispenser broke, and I didn't even have a modicum of inclination to replace it just for that silly little issue. It still works, it still functions. The soap just glops out now instead of coming out in a little stream. It doesn't come out anymore. It's not impacting the functionality. It's just making it look a little jankier on the kitchen sink. So there's that. The lost art of doing without, we're not going to replace that. We don't need to. It still works. And my husband can deal with it. Maybe that's the most important factor here. The adults in our household are not bothered by it. There are things that bother people, like I acknowledge that, and I live with somebody who does get bothered by some of these things more than I do. So in some cases, we do replace things because of that, and in other cases, like this dish soap dispenser example, we have managed to get by because nobody cares about it enough to want to make sure that we have the optimal dish soap dispenser. It's kind of like I've said in previous videos, where in some cases the one that's good enough will do, and we don't have to have the best one and the best version of everything if that's not something that we really need in any given category. I've also had comments about how sometimes it is actually the luxury status items that need the most maintenance, like the example of the Christian Louboutin shoes and how the red sole gets worn off and how you have to go get them resoled. And that's actually part of the luxury status nature of them. And, if you can afford to buy the shoes, you also have to have the time and resources to keep on getting them maintained so that they look how they're supposed to with the red sole and retain their status conveying shape, I guess, their status conveying feature. Same with things like doing your nails, right? You have to get that done periodically. The beauty treatments, right? You have to go get them redone, or, at the end of their life cycle, you can't really go around with chipped nails and have the same effect. You can't really go around with all your eyelash extensions falling out and not having a full set there and have the same effect. You have to go get those maintained. You can't just stop doing the Botox or suddenly you'll get your naturally occurring wrinkles. Like, what a terrible thing. I wonder if our brains just don't catch up to our aging as fast as we actually age. I had a moment the other day where I was going through my YouTube channel and noticing that I do tend to do a lot of eyebrows up in my thumbnail pictures and in real life, and it does tend to give me some pretty gnarly forehead wrinkles. So I will probably be very wrinkly very, very early in my aging process. And, you could argue that I'm already not young. So there we are. I'm in my 30s and wrinkly, and that's just how it is. And in my brain, I guess I don't necessarily associate wrinkles with age, because to me it's a consequence of natural facial expression. And so it's not something that bothers me, but it is something that I notice. And I guess I also noticed that I don't see it in many other creators' thumbnail pictures, and I wonder if that's an intentional choice for some people, or if these people are just naturally wrinkle-free, or, in some cases they are younger creators, so maybe they just don't have wrinkles when they raise their eyebrows. Anyway, that's a massive tangent, so let's bring it back. It also made me think of the ending is better than mending mantra from Brave New World, which I think we owe it to ourselves, to our planet, to our value system to fight against. Mending is better than ending. I maybe need to reread that book and maybe we'll have something to say about it when that happens, if that happens, after I get through my massive pile of books to be read in 2025. But in general, marketing tries to convince us that it's more fun, it's more value conscious, it's more practical, more accessible, or whatever it is to buy something new than to mend or take care of the things you already have. And this is the obstacle for us to surmount. I did some journaling here on how to determine if you need the replacement. And, the spoiler alert here is that you probably don't in a lot of cases. And, maybe that doesn't apply to most people. Maybe most people who think they need a replacement actually do need it. Maybe that's why they think they need it. But in my case, usually I don't. And that's why anytime I think I need a replacement, I have to rigorously vet the desire and try to have some kind of parameters for when that's a legitimate need and when it's not. Hence the over-justification perhaps for getting a larger size in some pants that I already owned at the beginning of, in the March recap rather. So in some of my journal entries, some of my journaling here, I talked about consumables and how they might seem relatively straightforward, but there's always that question of whether we actually need that consumable product at all. And so the option is not really, do I need to replace this, but it also becomes a question of, do I want to use this or not? And so there is an option to just not even use a lot of consumable products. And yes, there is a baseline for basic human hygiene, appearing in public. We want to be clean and not smelling bad. And so there's that. So if these products are essential to that, having soap and shampoo and whatever basic deodorant, then it's probably a pretty widely accepted need. And, maybe that even that depends on the kind of society in which we live and the kind of resources everybody has available and how difficult it is to do something like take a shower. So even that can't be a worldwide blanket need covered situation, because if you don't have running water, then it's maybe more forgivable for you to be not clean every single day and maybe not smelling super fresh every single day. We're just organisms with bodies that do things. And anyway, tangent. But when it comes to clothing and non-consumables, it gets a little bit less straightforward, as if my previous question of consuming things was straightforward to begin with, but it's a little less straightforward because that question still exists of whether you even need the thing in the first place. So, in the question of pants that get too small, do you have other options? And in my case, I did have other options. And so that's still kind of why, in terms of the strictest no-buy year, I would say that my purchase of pants that were larger was maybe not in line with somebody who would take it to the extreme. And I am not somebody that's willing to take it to the extreme. I would rather have comfortable pants. And so even in my no-buy year prior, 2024, when I had a couple of other pants get too small, I did replace them, and I did replace the same kind of quantity, rather than stringently evaluating whether I could cut down the pants I was used to rotating through and doing that kind of, it's ridiculous to me in some ways to say that takes mental effort and mental reflection. And, all we're doing here is removing a pair of pants as an option. And, maybe technically I did replace slightly fewer because I have put some away, I have resold some. So maybe it wasn't entirely accurate to say that I replaced all the pants that I've outgrown. And in terms of whether I actually use these, whether they were good purchases, yes, I use them and wear them all the time. However, were they all truly necessary? Again, it depends on values. And at the point that I'm at now, I do feel myself shifting to value having closer to what I actually need rather than in excess. And I know I've said this before, so it's not as if this is something new, but in terms of approaching the decision to buy things, it is kind of, I guess, becoming more of a thing than it has been. It's always been a thing as far as doing a no-buy year. Like, I want to get to the point of just having what I actually use, having the kind of capsule wardrobe amount of clothing. And at some point, I will probably rearrange my closet so that there's just not the space to have such excess. And, that might be part of my problem right now, is that I have room to have way more than I need. As is typical for many American households, the closet is designed to hold a lot of stuff. And again, I'm not trying to say that the houses are designed so that we feel empowered to buy things and fill them and constantly consume. But a lot of the popular decluttering methods, or, the container concept, has to be intentionally done when your container that your house comes with is larger than you would like it to be. I mean, talk about a first world problem right there. There's also many times I participated in the revolving door of rotation just for the sake of something new or something slightly better, or even to just fulfill the urges for shopping. And so that's another mentality to watch out for as well when we're looking at replacing versus repairing. You know, are we trying to fulfill any of these urges? And unless it's a legitimate need, unless there's a reason that you can't use the older version, you can't modify it, you can't repair it, then it's probably better to try to become that model for the values of repairing over replacing, the values of reasonable shopping for yourself and those around you, than to justify for any reason the purchase of something you don't truly need or don't truly need right now. I guess in the case of something like these shoes, your shoes will probably still wear out at some point, right? You'll pay the $35 cleaning fee or however much it costs to get them professionally cleaned. And then at some point down the road, they probably still will wear out, at which point a purchase of a new pair of shoes becomes necessary. In my experience as well, when I've replaced things sooner than they need to be replaced, there is usually something else. You know, I know at the time it might feel like these particular shoes are the ones that you're going to want, but down the road, let's say the shoes you have wear out in a year, there might be another pair that catches your fancy, or the same pair might still be available. And so you can make the choice between the same pair or a different pair with possibly other features. Maybe you've been ready for a change by then. I don't know, you know, without knowing your personal kind of shopping preferences. I know people in my life that prefer to bring in a few things every season, you know, refresh with a few new pieces per year in their wardrobes. And honestly, a lot of other people I just don't even know anything about their shopping habits. Maybe more people than not. It's not something that I spend a lot of time with people discussing. It's not something that I engage with people in my everyday life, despite having a whole channel kind of devoted to it. And perhaps that's actually why I have a whole channel devoted to it, since I just feel like it's not something that's prevalent in my interactions with people outside of this community. But anyway, this is another reason why I'm committed to continuing this journey and becoming that person, becoming that model of repairing things over replacing things, even when society and the infrastructures we have set up make that ridiculously inconvenient to do or more expensive to do. If the time comes where I need to resole any of my boots, I'm going to try to take them to a cobbler locally. And even if it costs $100, I would rather do that than look for new boots or, you know, throwing in arbitrary numbers here. Maybe that's wildly out of touch. Apologies if it is, but that day hasn't come yet, so we will see. I am determined to not buy any more shoes, any more clothes, any more of anything I don't really need, and still working through some of the narratives that I've learned, that I've absorbed about times that it's okay to do so. I really do want to get to a point where if I don't need it, I don't buy it, and I'm just okay with that. And we'll see. We'll see how many more bumps on the road come up on that path. But for now, that's where we stand. That's the end goal. And I guess maybe a final word on the patina of time, the aging of not just ourselves, but also our stuff, the wabi-sabi of it all and all that. So I guess the other thing I would have to say in this particular instance of the clean sneakers is that perhaps in some cases we can embrace the used look, the patina of time on the shoes we wear, the signs that they've been used and well loved. I mean, for goodness sakes, the Golden Goose sneakers are sold pre-worn out, right? So if there are high-end designer sneakers that are pre-made to look like they've been used and loved, then maybe we should be proud of the fact that our sneakers have shown the signs of being used and loved as well. And yes, you know, we could pay to get them cleaned or try to clean them ourselves. I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do, but in terms of having a new pristine pair of white sneakers versus the kind of dusty gray pair of used and enjoyed and sneakers that have served us well, in other words, you know, I think we can also have some pride in the latter, you know, the used pair, the wrinkles on our foreheads, and, you know, go through life with a little bit of that as well, maybe a lot of that. I would love to hear your stories about this below. I would love to hear positive tales of mending over ending, even times where it was frustratingly inconvenient, maybe, to repair instead of replace. I would love to hear about that as well. And if you have any ideas for making this easier in today's society, that's also lovely to hear. And with that, I will say bye for now and see you in the next one.